So as a UI UX designer, how do you kind of get in the head of your user to kind of develop your product?
So how do you get in the head of your user?
Who wants to take that?
There's actually a lot of different techniques that we use, and it's kind of nice. I mean, within IBM, we are a little bit spoiled in that we do have a bit of a captive audience, as it were. We know who our users are. We can get access to them in most cases. But most of what we're doing in terms of the user research is the conducting interviews with actual users, doing a lot of survey work, and increasingly looking at actually some of the data that we're collecting. I think our speaker this morning talked about how all that data that's coming in about what your users are actually doing currently can be used to drive decisions. So if we see that certain tasks are taking, on a particular system are taking 10 minutes, we're like, why is that? Why is it taking 10 minutes? Well, let's go dig into that a little bit and try to understand what's really happening there. And if it turns out that it's something that we think should only take 5 minutes is now taking users 10 minutes, and we think that that problem can be solved through design, that's something that we can, do. So, a lot of direct interactions with our actual end users, and then also just, this kind of ongoing collection of data through surveys and also through just the systems that they're using. As I'm sure you know, anytime you're on the computer these days, some data is being collected, right? And that data can be used to improve the experiences over time.
All right, okay. There's something that we tell ourselves a lot inside of Scout Design, and which is, you are not the user, meaning us, the designers. The users are different people than us, so therefore it's very critical to develop empathy with them, to understand exactly who they are and where they're coming from. You may have insight into yourself, but you don't want that to bias everything. You really need to talk to people. So some of the techniques that Ed mentioned, I would repeat the same ones, but there's some old tried and true ones. Like there's something, if you're doing a usability test, which is sort of a classic activity, where somebody tries to do something with your tool and you watch how good or not so well it goes. We always ask them to think aloud, which just means as they go through it, they're telling you what's going through their head. That helps you get in their head, because otherwise it's going to be a little difficult. So that's just one example of the type of thing that we mine, as well as those interviews and those other type of things. What's very important for us is that it's not always even what the users say to you. I mean, there's this famous quote that's used sometimes to discredit the role of design, which is, Henry Ford. I actually heard it's apocryphal, but everyone likes to say it, which is, if I asked my users what they wanted, they would have told me they wanted a faster horse. But maybe he asked the wrong question. Mm-hmm. What you do is you watch what their needs are, and you kind of look for what's really going to help them more. Not just take what they say at face value. You've got to talk to them, and you have to listen. But ultimately, you're going to be applying what think you've learned to their situation and that whole user context. And that is where the creative process comes in, because maybe you'll come up with something that's going to help them better based off what they heard you, what they said to you, than anything that particular user could have ever come up on their own. So it's important to get into their heads, yes, but it doesn't mean just doing what they tell you. It's trying to figure out what they really need.
Let's take another question. Any question at the top?
Hi, I teach consumer psychology at the University of Bridgeport, as well as other marketing classes. So this question is for you, John. For those students who study psychology and don't ever think about the career in marketing or the business world, what would be your advice?
Well, thank you. When Casey was up here, she kind of showed you that there's lots of paths to a design career. I sort of, in the back of my head, always knew I would end up here, partly because I just love computers, and I would spend a lot of time as a hobbyist. It was my hobby, working with computers. I'm going to kind of repeat a little bit what she said, which is basically do what your passion is and explore it and learn stuff along the way, because the background and what you learn, it all is going to ultimately be beneficial in leading you to where you want to go. If you want to become a designer, these things you can draw from, and they will help inform you and give you what you need. In terms of psychology, psychology is such a vast field. It has so many different parts to it, and so I was more on the experimental side of it, the kind of the science side of it, as opposed to the clinical side of it. So certainly I would say a psychology major should probably be more on that end of the continuum as opposed to clinical. And also there is a sister field that we know as human factors, which is sort of the science of doing what we're doing as designers in some sense. Definitely studying up on that. But I wouldn't stop there. I mean, I would brace looking into visual design skills and go beyond it, really become what we call a T-shaped person, not just stay in one area, because in the end, that's going to make you more flexible and give you the kind of skills you're ultimately going to need as a designer rather than just a psychologist.